My parents used their anniversary party to force my sister to pay off their debts, but it backfired. I'm still shaking as I write this, and I honestly don't know if I'm the hero or the villain in this story. I just need to get it all out, and maybe some strangers on the internet can give me an outside perspective, because my world has completely imploded. It all started with my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. My parents, Tomas and Inez, are what you might call community pillars in our little corner of Santiago. They're the couple everyone knows. The ones who host the perfect backyard parties, remember everyone's birthday, and always have a bottle of expensive wine to share. They've built this perfect, glossy image of success and generosity. But it's a lie. It's all a carefully constructed lie. And my sister Valeria and I have been the ones paying for the props for years. The reality is my parents live so far beyond their means, it's almost comical. They have champagne tastes on a beer budget, but they refuse to admit it. So, for as long as I can remember, family support has been a one-way street that flows directly from my and Valeria's bank accounts into theirs. We're not their daughters, we're their revolving line of credit, their emergency fund, their get-out-of-jail-free card for every dumb financial decision they make. It's always some crisis. A phone call, always late at night, my mother's voice trembling with fake panic. "Paula, honey, we had a bit of an emergency with the plumbing," or "the car just died and your father needs it for work." We'd pay. We always did. And then a week later, we'd see the pictures on Facebook. Mom showing off a new designer handbag, Dad with a brand new set of golf clubs. They'd post photos of themselves at some fancy new restaurant with captions like, "Treating ourselves, you only live once," while we were eating instant noodles to make up for the money we'd just sent them. The audacity still makes my stomach churn. So when they announced they were throwing this huge catered party at the community center for their 30th anniversary, my first thought wasn't joy or congratulations. It was a cold, sinking dread. A knot of pure anxiety in my gut that felt like I'd swallowed a stone. I just thought, who's paying for this one? I knew, of course. It would be us, one way or another. They'd either hit us up for money before, or they'd rack up a massive credit card bill and come to us crying a month later, acting shocked at how the costs added up. I tried to talk to Valeria about it, but she was already so fragile. It felt like kicking a puppy. She just sort of shrugged, her eyes looking distant. "It's what they do, Paula. It's just what they do." There was a weariness in her voice that scared me. This was supposed to be a happy milestone, a celebration of my parents' marriage. But for me, it just felt like the stage being set for the next biggest shakedown yet. I had this horrible gut feeling that this party wasn't just a party. It was a performance. And I was beginning to realize I couldn't be part of the cast anymore. I just had no idea how spectacularly the whole show was about to come crashing down. The dread I felt about this party wasn't just a hunch, it was a scar from a dozen other humiliations. The worst one was about 2 years ago. They called us in a full-blown panic. Dad had co-signed a loan for some sketchy business venture a friend was starting, and of course, the friend bailed and the whole thing collapsed. They were on the hook for thousands, and the bank was threatening to put a lien on their house. Mom was crying so hard on the phone I could barely understand her. So, my Sil Valeria and I did what we always do. We drained our savings. We put it on our own credit cards. We cleaned up their mess. It took us months to recover financially. 2 weeks after we made the final payment, I was scrolling through Instagram, and a picture popped up. It was my mother wearing a huge sun hat and designer sunglasses, clinking champagne glasses with my dad on a beach in Punta Cana. The caption read, "Finally taking some time for ourselves. Sometimes you just have to enjoy the simple things in life. Blessed, well-deserved." I felt the blood drain from my face. I threw my phone across the room. The simple things we had paid for. You'd think, knowing how much we've sacrificed, they'd show a little sensitivity. Especially now. My sister, my poor Sil, is going through the worst time of her life. She just ended a 5-year engagement. The guy didn't just cheat on her. He completely blindsided her, packed his bags while she was at work, and left a note on the fridge. Valeria is a shell of herself. She's lost so much weight she looks like a ghost. Her eyes are permanently puffy from crying, and she barely speaks. My parents know all of this. They saw her break down at dinner just last month. Yet, they've been relentlessly pressuring her about this party, about keeping up appearances, and not letting her personal drama ruin their big day. It's monstrous. I thought their selfishness was just a clueless, self-absorbed character flaw. I was wrong. It's calculated. A few months ago, I was at their house and picked up the family iPad to look up a recipe. Their iMessage was open. I know I shouldn't have looked, but a message from my dad to my mom caught my eye. It was about our Tio, their cousin, who had just asked to borrow money. My dad had written, "Inez, he's too soft. Just like the girls. You just have to put on a little pressure and they fold every time. It's too easy." My blood ran cold. They see us, their own daughters, their family, as marks, as easy targets to be manipulated. It wasn't desperation. It was a strategy. That brings me to 3 nights ago. The final piece of the puzzle. The thing that made everything click into place in the most horrific way. I was getting ready for bed when I got a voice note from Valeria. Her voice was just a whisper, so broken and full of shame it was like listening to a confession. She told me something she's been hiding for almost a decade. When she was 19, in her first year of university, our parents were in a deep financial hole. Without telling her, they used her information to take out 2 high-interest personal loans in her name. She only found out years later when she was rejected for a car loan because her credit was absolutely destroyed. They gaslit her, told her she must have been a victim of identity theft, and then helped her pay it off with money they guilted from her older relatives. They ruined her future to save their present, and then they made her think she was crazy. Hearing her whisper this story, the one she'd been carrying alone for all these years, I felt a kind of rage I've never experienced. It was white-hot and pure. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the theft, the lies, the years of psychological damage. And holding that voice note on my phone, I knew I was holding a weapon. The party wasn't just going to be a shakedown. I was going to make sure it was a reckoning. The community center was suffocating. My parents had somehow managed to make the big, drafty hall feel claustrophobic, cramming it with too many tables and covering every surface in cheap gold and white streamers that were already starting to droop in the humidity. The air was thick with the smell of catered food, my mother's cloying perfume, and the simmering judgment of our extended family. Everyone was there, all the tias and tios, the nosy neighbors, my parents' work colleagues, all of them dressed in their Sunday best, sipping cheap sparkling wine from plastic flutes and making small talk while their eyes darted around, sizing everyone up. Valeria sat next to me, a ghost at the feast, picking at her bread roll and trying to make herself invisible. I kept my hand on her knee under the table, a silent promise that I was right there. After what felt like an eternity of forced smiles and awkward conversations, my father, Tomas, tapped the microphone. The resulting screech of feedback made everyone wince. He beamed, a wide, practiced smile plastered on his face. "Friends, family, thank you all for coming to celebrate 30 wonderful years with my beautiful Inez." A smattering of polite applause. He launched into a rambling speech about love and partnership, hitting all the expected notes. But then his tone shifted. His smile became a little tighter, a little more predatory. "Now, Inez and I have been on a real journey," he said, his voice oozing fake sincerity. "Not just a journey of love, but a financial one too. We've learned that true wealth isn't about what's in your bank account, but about the support system you build." I felt a cold dread snake up my spine. This was it. He gestured to a small table near the stage, where a truly hideous cardboard box sat, clumsily wrapped in gold foil. On the front, in glittery, childish letters, it read, "The Tomas and Inez Legacy Fund." My jaw literally dropped. He was passing a hat, at his own anniversary party. But it got so much worse. "And speaking of support," he boomed into the mic, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed directly on my sister. "I'd like to call up our biggest success story, the daughter who has always understood the meaning of family. Valeria, darling, come on up here." Every head in the room turned to look at her, Valeria froze, her fork clattering onto her plate. She looked at me, her eyes wide with pure animal terror. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I gave her a tiny, encouraging nod, not knowing what else to do. She stood up, her movements stiff and jerky, and walked toward the stage as if she were walking to her own execution. My father wrapped a heavy arm around her shoulders, pulling her into his side. She looked so small and fragile next to him. "This one," he announced, squeezing her shoulder, "has a, very special gift for us tonight. To help us start the next 30 years on a clean slate, Valeria has decided to lead the charge and make a foundational pledge to clear our outstanding debts." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was publicly shaming her into bailing them out. He was turning her into his fundraising mascot. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Then he held up a pen and a small pledge card. "Now, she's a little shy," he said with a condescending chuckle. "So she's just going to write down her contribution, and we'll put it right in the box to get things started." He tried to hand the pen to her. I watched, paralyzed with rage, as Valeria's hand rose to meet his. It was shaking. Not just a little tremor, but a violent, uncontrollable quake. Her whole body was trembling. The pen rattled against the card as she tried to take it. Her face was chalk white, her lips tinged with blue, and she stared at the pen as if it were a venomous snake. She couldn't hold it. She couldn't even close her fingers around it. Her eyes darted around the silent, staring crowd before locking with mine. In them, I saw a decade of pain, of shame, of being their silent victim. And in that instant, something inside me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowed anger, erupted into a cold, white-hot clarity. They weren't just asking for money. They were trying to break what was left of her, right here, in front of everyone. And I was done letting them. Everything went quiet in my head. The murmuring of the crowd, the terrible smooth jazz my dad had chosen for the background music, the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. It all faded into a dull, distant hum. All I could see was Valeria's trembling hand, her ghost-white face, and the smug, expectant look on my father's. It wasn't just a look of greed, it was ownership. He was parading his broken daughter on stage like a prize pig he was about to cash in. And in that moment, the rage I'd felt simmer for years didn't explode. It crystallized. It became something cold, hard, and perfectly clear in my chest. A strange, almost serene calm washed over me. This wasn't a choice anymore. It was a chemical reaction. Years of enabling them, of biting my tongue, of sending them money I couldn't afford to part with. It all led to this. Every single wire transfer, every emergency call I answered, it was a down payment on this exact moment of public degradation for my sister. I was just as guilty as they were for letting it get this far. I helped build this stage. Now I was going to burn it to the ground. While every single eye in that room was glued to the horrifying spectacle on stage, I stood up. No one noticed. I was just another face in the crowd. I moved slowly, deliberately, my steps feeling strangely light, as if I were floating. I slipped along the back wall of the hall, past the buffet table with its congealing food, toward the corner where the DJ had set up his cheap sound system, and the community center's ancient humming projector was perched on a wobbly cart. My laptop was in my bag, which I'd left on my chair, but I knew I couldn't go back for it. So I caught my cousin's eye, one of the few who knew a fraction of the story, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward my seat. He just got it. A few moments later, he was at my side in the shadows by the tech table, my heavy laptop bag in his hand. He just squeezed my arm, a silent "go get 'em," and melted back into the crowd. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands, I swear, were as steady as a surgeon's. I unzipped the bag and pulled out my laptop. The screen came to life, illuminating a single folder on the desktop innocently labeled Family Memories. I had put it together the night I heard Valeria's voice note. I had hoped, prayed, that I wouldn't need it. But hope is a luxury you can't afford with people like my parents. Inside that folder was a decade of their lies, meticulously documented. The projector was connected to the DJ's laptop, which was just cycling through a cheesy slideshow of old family photos of my parents. The HDMI cable was right there. It would be so easy. I took a deep breath, the stale air filling my lungs. I could hear my father's voice droning on, trying to fill the awkward silence from the stage. "She's just overwhelmed with emotion, folks. Aren't you, sweetie? So proud of her parents." That was it. That was the final push. I reached down, my fingers closing around the warm plastic of the HDMI cable. With a soft click, I unplugged it from the DJ's machine. The screen behind my father went blank, plunging the stage into a stark, flat light. A few people murmured in confusion. My dad faltered, mid-sentence. His eyes scanned the room, looking for the source of the technical glitch. He hadn't found me yet. I had maybe 10 seconds. With another click, I plugged the cable into the port on my own laptop. The machine chimed softly as it detected the new display. On my screen, I opened the folder. They wanted a public spectacle. They wanted to make a show of my sister's pain for their own financial gain. Fine. I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. My finger clicked the trackpad, and the first slide slammed onto the giant screen behind my father. It wasn't a happy family photo. It was a sterile, damning screenshot of a bank transfer. My name, Valeria's name, and the date were clearly visible, next to an I, arrow pointing to a 5-figure sum being deposited into my father's account. The memo line read, "Final payment for Dad's business loan." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. My father spun around, his folksy smile dissolving into a mask of pure confusion. Click. The next slide. A collage of their "We're so broke" Punta Cana vacation photos. There was my mother, champagne glass in hand, beaming on the beach. There was my father, grinning on a golf course, the Caribbean Sea sparkling behind him. I'd superimposed the date of the photos right next to the date of our bank transfer. They were taken exactly 8 days apart. The murmurs in the room grew louder, turning from confused whispers to angry, pointed ones. I saw my Tia Carmen lean over and say something to my uncle, who shook his head in disbelief. Click. The final image in the first salvo, a screenshot of the texts from the family iPad. My dad's words, blown up to a monstrous size for all to see. "Inez, he's too soft, just like the girls. You just have to put on a little pressure and they fold every time. It's too easy." That's when the chaos started. My uncle, my dad's brother and his biggest defender, shot up from his table with a roar. "What the hell is this? Shut it off!" He was a big man, and he charged toward my little corner like a bull, his face purple with rage. He wasn't trying to talk to me. He was going straight for the power cord. He started yanking at the tangle of wires behind the projector, trying to kill the image that was destroying his brother's reputation in real time. He was fumbling, clumsy with panic, and that gave me my opening. While he was wrestling with the cables, I walked out of the shadows and straight toward the stage. My father was frozen, staring at the screen with a look of utter horror, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Valeria was still standing there, but the trembling had stopped. She was just watching me, her eyes filled with a kind of terrified awe. I walked right up to my dad, reached out, and took the microphone from his limp hand. He didn't even resist. I turned to face the crowd, the warmth of the spotlight on my face. "Just one more thing," I said, my voice shaking slightly but clear as a bell in the now silent room. I clicked the trackpad one last time. The text messages vanished, replaced by a crisp, high-resolution image of an official document. It was a screenshot of the confirmation page for the identity theft and fraud report I had filed online against my parents on Valeria's behalf just hours earlier. The official case number was circled in bright red. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so total you could hear the ice shifting in people's glasses. And into that deafening silence, I held my phone up to the microphone and pressed play. It was the voice note from my mother. Her voice, usually so warm and melodic, was tinny and cold as it echoed through the speakers. "Look," she was saying, the sound of her sipping wine audible in the background. "We used Valeria's credit because hers is clean, and we knew she'd eventually forgive us. She always does. It was just easier this way." The recording ended. For one long, agonizing second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the room exploded. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was outrage. People were standing up, shouting questions, pointing at my parents on the stage. My mother looked like she had been struck by lightning, her face a mess, of shock and pure, undiluted fury at being caught. She wasn't sorry. She was just cornered. The aftermath wasn't a clean victory. It was just messy. The donation box, the Tomas and Ines Legacy Fund, sat on its little table, a monument to their greed. It was completely, beautifully empty. Not a single person had put a peso in it. While my mother was still staring at me with a look of pure, venomous hatred, my Tia Rosa and Tia Elena, my dad's own sisters, cornered him by the stage. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. That money for the roof, Tomas. We need it back. Now. You told me you were about to lose the house. You were on a beach. The adrenaline that had made my hands so steady started to drain away, leaving a bone-deep tremor in its place. I watched my parents, stripped of their charm and their lies, just stand there and take it. They didn't even try to defend themselves. About 10 minutes later, without a word to anyone, they were gone. They just slipped out, the side door of their own 30th anniversary party, leaving a room full of their own history buzzing with the scandal they had created. Valeria and I left soon after. The car ride home was silent. She just held my hand, her grip so tight it almost hurt, and stared out the window. The initial rush, that feeling of righteous, avenging fury, was gone. It had been replaced by something heavy and hollow in the pit of my stomach. It felt like I'd just performed surgery with a chainsaw. Yes, the tumor was gone, but the patient was bleeding out on the table. Did I go too far? The question started as a whisper in my head and grew into a roar. Exposing them in front of everyone they had ever wanted to impress felt like the only language they would understand. For years, their public image was the only thing they cared about, so it was the only thing I could take from them. It felt completely, totally justified in the moment. I was protecting my sister from predators who just happened to share our DNA. But seeing the looks on the faces of some of my older relatives, the sheer shock and pity, it felt horrifyingly brutal. I had turned a family celebration into a public execution. I had saved Valeria, I know I did. But in the process, I might have just destroyed what little was left of our family forever. I keep replaying it in my head, searching for another way. Could I have pulled them aside? Talked to them privately? But a bitter laugh bubbles up in my throat every time I think that. We did that. For 10 years, we did that. We begged, we cried, we reasoned. We showed them spreadsheets and bank statements. We tried to get them into financial counseling. Every single attempt was met with denial, gaslighting, or emotional blackmail. They would cry and say we didn't love them, or they would get angry and accuse us of being ungrateful. There was no other way. I know that in my bones. And yet, am I a hero for what I did? Or am I a monster? I look at Valeria, who has started sleeping through the night for the first time in months, and I feel like a hero. But then I remember the look on my mother's face as she stood on that stage. It's burned into my memory. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't shame for what she'd done. It was the incandescent rage of a narcissist who had just been exposed. The shock wasn't that she had hurt her daughter, it was that her daughter had dared to fight back. And seeing that look, that utter lack of regret, makes me feel justified. But it also makes me feel sick. It confirms I was raised by strangers, and I'm the one who ripped the masks off. It's been a week of the loudest silence I have ever experienced. After the party, I expected my phone to explode with screaming calls from my parents, with threats and accusations and crocodile tears. But there was nothing. For 2 days, absolute radio silence. It was terrifying in its own way. Then, on the third day, Valeria and I both got an email. Not from them, but from a lawyer, acting as a neutral third-party mediator. It turns out the only thing more powerful than their greed is their fear of actual, real-world consequences. The threat of that fraud charge, of having to explain to a judge why they ruined their own daughter's credit was enough to make them finally take this seriously. After a few tense emails back and forth through the mediator, we have an agreement. It's a legally binding repayment plan. They have to pay Valeria back for every single cent of the fraudulent loans plus interest. And on top of that, they have to pay back everything she and I have loaned them over the past 5 years. It's all there in black and white, a cold, transactional accounting of their betrayals. If they miss a single payment by more than 24 hours, the mediator is instructed to give us the go-ahead, and we file the official charges with the police. There are no more chances, no more sob stories, just a contract. The family, of course, is completely fractured. It's like I detonated a bomb and now everyone is choosing a side in the rubble. My tia Carmen called me crying and told me I was a legend. She confessed that my father had borrowed money from her for a medical emergency last year, and she never saw it again. She said she was proud of me for finally holding him accountable. A few of my cousins have reached out with messages of support, sharing their own stories of my parents' financial manipulations. But then there's the other side. My uncle, my father's brother, sent me a string of texts calling me a cruel, vindictive monster who got a sick thrill from humiliating my own parents. He said I'd destroyed the family name over a misunderstanding about money. He's blocked now. Valeria and I are closer than we have ever been. We're a unit. We spent the last few nights just sitting on my couch, not even talking much, just existing in the same space. The other night, we were watching some stupid comedy on Netflix, and she laughed. It wasn't a small, polite chuckle. It was a real, deep belly laugh. The kind I haven't heard from her in over a year. And in that moment, hearing that sound, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. That laugh is the only proof I need that I did the right thing for her. We are completely no contact with our parents. Their numbers are blocked, their emails are filtered to spam. For the first time, there is a wall they cannot breach. So here we are. We got what we wanted, I guess. We got the money back, we got the legal protection, we got them out of our lives. But there's no victory parade. It just feels quiet. I did what I felt I had to do. They took a celebration of their marriage and turned it into a public stage to financially and emotionally bleed my sister dry. They made it an ambush. So I turned it into a trial, with the whole family as the jury. But seeing the fallout, the way our family has been split down the middle, I can't stop that voice in my head from asking the question over and over again. Ada for publicly exposing my parents' years of financial abuse and fraud at their 30th anniversary party.